What's up everybody, Greg here with Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be checking out some new gear, the Fuji X-T4, and comparing it against the Fuji X-T3, talking about some of the specs, the body, the build, design, all of the different changes that they've made. Now, I gotta be honest with you, if you're a photographer and you're shooting on the Fuji X-T3 already, there's not a huge difference between the X-T4. Now, where this really starts to shine is if you're a hybrid shooter and you're doing a lot of photo and video as well, and that's where a lot of those upgrades come, is for those video shooters. Now getting into one of the biggest things that they've probably added into the X-T4, and that has to be the in-body image stabilization. Now this was previously only seen on the Fuji X-H1, which is a very video-focused mirrorless camera from Fuji, and it's really great to see that they've been able to fit it into such a small body, almost basically the same size as the X-T3. Now, besides the 5-axis in-body image stabilization, there's also a digital IS, which does crop in a little bit. I believe it's 1.1 times, so not a huge crop, and that's gonna help stabilize out some of the micro jitters that you're getting with using such a small body like this when you're shooting handheld. Another one that they've added in, which is a really cool mode, it's Boost IS, which is basically turning your camera or your handheld into a tripod. Now this is only used for static shots. It's not designed to turn it into a gimbal and have really flowing, smooth movements. It's really designed just for those lockdown shots where you want it to have the same exact frame and you don't want it to be shifting. One of the other really nice improvements that they've made is that they've swapped out the battery to be a new Fuji battery that has almost double the capacity of the one in the X-T3. So you're gonna get a lot more photos and a lot more videos out of this battery. It's also a little bit bigger, which kind of leads into the next thing, and that's the body of the camera. Because it has that in-body image stabilization, there needs to be a little bit more room in there for that sensor to be able to move around, as well as fitting the bigger battery. So you get a little bit beefier body that has a nice deep grip on it to fit that battery in there, as well as just feeling a little more solid in your hand. They've also updated the electronic viewfinder to be a little bit bigger and have a little more resolution in there, so you're gonna get a clearer picture when you're using that electronic viewfinder. And other than that, all of the buttons have pretty much stayed in the same place, besides a couple of them switching locations just to make them a little bit easier to access. The only big change that they made with the dials is that the sub collar underneath the shutter dial is actually switched over from a light metering mode to a stills and video. Again, lending more towards that hybrid style of shooting for people who are going to be doing a lot of stills and video and want to be able to jump back and forth between them really easy. The thing that I'm probably most excited about with the body of the X-T4 is that they've switched over from just a normal tilt screen to a tilt and flip screen, so it has a variable angle direction, so you can kind of rotate around wherever you need to see it. Again, lending more towards those hybrid shooters, people who might be shooting themselves, so vloggers, where you can flip it around and you can actually see what you're shooting. You can put it on the back and pretty much put it in whatever angle you need it to be in. And it keeps all that same touch functionality of touch to autofocus and touch to shutter that you get on the X-T3. The one thing I really don't like with the new X-T4 body has to do with the ports. Now there's actually a couple things here that I don't like. The first one is that the doors are not removable. Like you could with the X-T3, you could take those off. So if you're using these ports a lot, especially for people shooting video, putting in a mic as well as headphones, you can't keep these doors off. So they're always gonna be dangling here and just kind of in the way. The other thing is that you'll notice that there is no headphone port anymore. What they've done is switched over to be the USB-C, and it comes with an adapter, so it's USB-C to a 3.5mm jack to plug in your headphones. Now that's great that they do have an adapter and an option for that. The thing is you won't be able to use that USB-C for anything else. So if you wanted to power the camera off that USB-C, if you want to do any sort of data transfer, you can't do that while you have your headphones plugged in. So that's kind of a downside for me. I'd really like to see the headphone jack on here instead of, say, like the remote port, because I don't really use that one, but that's just me. Now let's get into the specs and performance of these two cameras, starting off with the photo side. Now the X-T4 can go up to 15 frames a second using the mechanical shutter, where the X-T3 can only go up to 11 frames a second. If you switch over to the electronic shutter, both of them can go up to 20 frames a second, or even up to 30 frames a second, but you do get a 1.25 times crop on the image when you're using those faster frame rates. Another thing Fuji has done with the X-T4 is improve the autofocus algorithm. Now instead of just doing distance data, it also pulls in shape and color, so it's going to be a lot more accurate. It also can go into lower light autofocus much better, going to I think -6 EV versus -3 on the X-T3. Now the great thing about this, since it is the exact same autofocus system in both of these cameras, Fuji could down the line release a firmware to put that new information and that new algorithm into the X-T3, which would be really awesome to see. It just depends on how long it takes them to get it there. Now hopping over to the video side and looking at some of the frame rates and resolution options. Again, both of these cameras are very similar. They can both do 4K 60 frames a second at 420 internally, as well as 422 externally through the HDMI. The big change comes with their high speed options. The X-T4 can now go up to 240 frames a second in full HD versus the 120 frames a second on the X-T3. So getting up to 10 times slow motion on the X-T4, and you do get a slight crop with that, going to a 1.29 times crop when you're shooting in those high-speed modes. A nice thing that they've added in is that you can apply that crop across all of your frame rates and resolutions. So if you wanted to shoot 240 frames a second, you can also put that 1.29 times crop on your 4K 30 or 4K 60. And that's gonna help you keep the same field of view, so your lens choice is gonna be much easier. You're not gonna have two separate ones for different fields of view as you go between those different frame rates. And lastly, let's get into some of the menus and user interface. Now, for the most part, these have stayed pretty similar. The biggest difference with the X-T4 is that now the photo and video are separate. So when you're on the still side and you open up the menu, you're only gonna get options to change your photo settings. Now, if you're in video, you're only gonna get options to change your video. So really putting a separation between those two types of shooters. There's also a new setting called Movie Optimized Control, and what this does is basically save your settings and separate them from photo and video. So if you go in, you can set up your video settings, and if you jump over to photo, you can have a completely different set of settings. So if you're going back and forth a lot, you're not gonna have to keep resetting your settings every time you wanna shoot photo or video. Now the next thing to talk about is obviously the price. The X-T4 is the newest camera in this lineup, and it runs at $1,700, which for what you're getting with this camera is still not a bad price. If you did want to save some money, or you're definitely leaning more towards the photo side, the X-T3, you could pick up one new for about $1,300. So a decent amount of savings for this camera system, especially if you're only going to be doing photo. I would recommend going with the X-T3. Now, if you plan on doing a lot of hybrid shooting, like I mentioned kind of throughout this video, the X-T4 definitely has more video features, the in-body image stabilization, the tilting flipping screen, as well as those separate photo and video modes to just have easier access and control over your camera. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of the Fuji X-T4? Let me know in the comments down below. If you guys want to try one of these cameras out, the X-T4 or even the X-T3, head on over to lensprotogo.com. I'll throw some links in the description down below so you can definitely go and check those out. If this video helped you out, give you a little more information, comparison between the two, help you make a decision, let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.